Outsells Live. We rolling? Okay, thanks people for stopping by. Today I'm reading Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. I gotta tell you, Harriet Beecher Stowe was a bad woman, alright? Let me hit you with this passage right now. I'm just reading this scene right now where this lady found out that they had sold her son off and they were coming to get the son in the morning. So that night she scoops him up and runs. The kid is like, 5, 6, 7 years old, so he's getting real tired out there on the road. And he tells his mother, listen, I'm about to fall asleep. She's carrying him, and he asks her, listen, if I fall asleep, you're not going to let them get me, are you? And the mother says, no. And then he says, are you sure? And then she says, yes, I'm sure, said the mother in a voice that startled herself. For it seemed to her to come from a spirit within that was no part of her. And the boy dropped his little weary head on her shoulder and was soon asleep. How the touch of those warm arms, the gentle breathings that came in her neck, seemed to add fire and spirit to her movements. It seemed to her as if strength poured into her in electric streams from every gentle touch and movement of the sleeping, confiding child. Sublime is the dominion of the mind over the body that for a time can make flesh and nerve impregnable and string the sinews like steel so that the weak become so mighty. Now see, that's some excellent writing right there. I'm really not all that crazy about the Old English. To me, it's a little bit stilted. I think we have a lot more creative freedom with the language now, so that we can be even more dramatic. But this is a book that has stood the test of time, and that's something that's very meaningful for me, because whenever I'm putting pen to paper, always from the very first day that I'm working on a project, I have in my mind the idea that I'm striving to produce a classic, a book that will outlive me. It will live for generations and generations. And that's what this lady did, and that's why I have a lot of respect for what she's accomplished, and this is why I'm actually reading the book for the first time in my life. So, if I can have this type of success with Stoneheart the Bronx, that's it, it's over. And I mean, I can really appreciate what she did here. Actually is produce what I call a work of inspired fiction. She grew up in a family that was anti-slavery from the beginning. And what inspired her to actually sit down and write the book was her sister writing her letter. And her sister told her, if I could use a pen as you can, I would write something that would make this whole nation feel what an accursed thing slavery is. And her son, Charles Stowe, who was relating this story years later, said that at that point his mother jumped up and said, I will write something. By God, I will if I live. And so that to me is what I call inspired fiction. She opened herself up to receive this source of creativity that just poured through her. And when you read the book, you'll see that, she was a very shrewd observer of slavery, and so many authentic details in here that it's almost a wonder that, that type of authentic detail that she was writing, that she herself wasn't a slave. So the success of the book was amazing. She published the book in March of 1852. She went to one publisher. They rejected it. They said no, they felt that a book like this written by a woman, an anti-slave book, was a bad risk for them, a bad business risk, and that it would alienate a lot of their southern readers. So her father had a connection with another publisher. That's who she took it to, and eventually got it published there. The publisher told her, listen, the best deal I can offer you is we split 50-50, the profits as well as all the costs. She was afraid to take that deal, so she ended up taking just 10%. And she hoped that with that money, she'd be able to at least buy herself a new dress. Well, what happened is that in the first week, the book sold 10,000 copies, and at the end of the first year, it had sold 1 million copies. Okay. By 1861, on the eve of the Civil War, it had sold 4 million copies. And what's so staggering about that figure is that the book was banned in most southern legislatures, so a lot of people in the South couldn't even read it. But basically, even with that being said, basically 1 out of 4 or 5 Americans had a copy of Uncle Tom's Cabin at that time. So she, I guess she got that new dress, and you might as well say she actually revamped her entire wardrobe. So the reaction to the book, especially from the South, she received a lot of criticism from it. And I'm going to hit you with some of the criticisms that she received. Okay, one person says that she fails to understand that blacks are inferior to whites and that the Bible justifies and the American Constitution supports slavery. Someone else said, on the rare occasions that slave families were split, it was usually due to the evil conduct of the slaves themselves. Somebody else, another critic. Whipping was unfortunately and occasionally necessary to ensure order, and that the housed and well-fed slaves as part of the larger family of the plantation were essentially better off than the wage slaves in northern factories. Wow. Unbelievable. Her claims that slavery was a national sin in her willful recommendation of the higher law of conscience over that of the law of the land were incitements to northern interference in southern affairs that could only end in civil war. Another critic says that Mrs. Stowe has forfeited the right to be called a lady because she has depicted scenes of license and impurity in her book, and ideas of loathsome depravity and habitual prostitution, and because she has forgotten all the sweet and social instincts of her sex, she is now fair game. Another critic, Mr. William Sims, wrote, Mrs. Stowe betrays a malignity so remarkable that the petticoat lifts of itself, and we see the hoof of the beast under the table. He condemned her to perpetual bedfellowship with the mulatto George Harris for having the effrontery to describe him as a handsome man. Now this shows you how deep this sickness is, this racism thing. They're criticizing her for describing George Harris as handsome. George Harris is a fictional character that she created in her book. And because she described him as handsome, this is like unbelievable. The ugliest rejection of the novel came in a package addressed to her from somewhere in the South. It contained the severed ear of a black with an accompanying card deriding her defense of the damn niggers. Wow. Unbelievable. And you know what the most frightening thing is? They would put us back in chains today if you only give them a chance. But